Well, it's a bloody merry morning, baby left me without warning sometime in the night. So I'm flying down to Houston with forgetting her the nature of my flight. As we taxi toward the runway with the smog and haze reminding me of how I feel. Just a country boy who's learning that the pitfalls of the city are extremely real.
Edwin Canistracci here, yeah, with a fresh new look for the summertime, and I'm drinking some Gentleman Jack, and it's the reason why I'm drinking some whiskey is because we're talking about Willie Nelson, Whiskey River. Don't run dry, baby, don't run dry. That's right, normally I do hard rock and heavy metal reviews, but I've been known to throw a few curveballs. Sometimes I do a little pop, a little country, a little R&B, because I love all kinds of music, and I do love country, especially 1970s outlaw country. Love that shit. Pretty much any 1970s country I like. Also love 1960s country too. Pretty much 60s and 70s country is my favorite, but that's my favorite for a lot of stuff. But definitely country. I did a Waylon Jennings review where I reviewed all Waylon Jennings albums from the 70s. So if you're a Waylon fan, and if you're a Willie fan, you probably are a Waylon fan. Goes together like peanut butter and jelly. Waylon and Willie. Got it? If you like one, you probably like the other. But anyway, so check out that video where I go through all of Waylon's discography throughout the 70s. And I'll tell you this, Waylon Jennings is my favorite country singer, but Willie Nelson is a close second. I love Willie. I give Waylon a slight edge because he has more albums, especially throughout the 70s, that I'm a bigger fan of than Willie. But man, Willie's still amazing artist. Love him. Of course, he's one of the greatest songwriters of the 20th century. Amazing guitarist, underrated guitarist, because I don't hear a lot of people talk about his guitar playing, but it usually is songwriting and singing, which are both amazing. But his guitar playing is next level, and usually he plays acoustic, but he does these really punchy leads on the acoustic guitar. It's really impressive stuff. He has a really distinct sound, and I love his guitar playing. But we're here to talk specifically about my favorite thing Willie Nelson ever did, my two favorite Willie Nelson albums, and this is one of my favorite box sets of all time. Here we go. Willie Nelson, The Atlantic Years. There, you got that there. You also got the thing up there, the graphic. Yeah, high tech, baby. I know how to operate iMovie. I'm getting a lot better though. You should check. If you see my old videos, man, I'm much better now. But yeah, here we go. This is old school. It's old school. I'm holding a box that has CDs in it. There's CDs in this. I don't even have a CD player in my Mac anymore. And Complete Atlantic Years is only 3 albums. In 2 albums that were released, and there's a lot of sessions though. There's a lot of outtakes and alternative tracks and things on those 2 separate studio albums. And there's a live album that was shelved at the time, recorded in the mid-70s but not released, that they released here, which is awesome. And this was really when I got really into Willie Nelson, was because of this box set. And this box set is one of my favorite box sets I ever got. It's in top 5, and I still have it. And I love the whole cigar box style. It's a nice thing. You can't really see this, but it's like kind of a tin plate. It's really great. I love this, the design of this box set. And it features, this is the thing, he was only on Atlantic for a very short time, for only 2 studio albums, but they happen to be his 2 greatest studio albums. And one album, which I'll be talking about, is my very favorite country album of all time. I love it even more than my favorite Waylon Jennings album. So even though Waylon is my favorite country artist, Willie recorded my favorite country album. This album is easily my favorite country album. It's always been my favorite country album, and it's still my favorite country album. And it's just one of my favorite albums of all time in general. But let me show you this. What you got is a very lovely box set. It's got this. You lift it. Ooh. It's very convenient. See that? It's very nice. And they did that thing which I love because I'm into. I'm a music geek. I get into this shit. They reproduced the LP covers, CDs. So these very nice. And it's Shotgun Willie. Shotgun Willie, his first album on Atlantic, and a very important album for him. And really the album where he really fully embraced the whole outlaw country image, and his hair was now long, and he grew the beard. And this was a very important album for Willie, and it's really the one that, this is the album that really, I mean, you got a little bit of it in Yesterday's Wine. That was the prior album. You got a little bit of it in Yesterday's Wine. His hair was growing out a little bit. He had stubble, and he started to incorporate a little bit of the outlaw sound. But it was with this album. This is full-fledged outlaw. You know, you got the shotgun. There you go, 2 barrels. And, you know, he has the beard. And this is it. This is the shotgun blast of outlaw country. And we're going to talk about these albums individually. And actually, you know what? Let's just talk about this album now. Let's go into it. So this is a good time. It's right in front of me. So it starts off Shotgun Willie. And you already, it sounds like this is a different Willie than the Willie we've listened to in the past. Now, I've gotten a lot of his earlier albums well. I mean, going back, Willie was recording music starting in the 50s, you know, and he wrote Patsy Cline's Crazy. Actually, it was his Crazy. It was Willie Nelson's Crazy. He had a recording of it, and then she covered it. But, of course, her version became the more famous version. But Willie would still play it live, you know, from time to time. And he made a lot of money off of that song. He had publishing rights. It was his song. But the thing is, that song was successful, but Willie himself wasn't that successful. So, you know, he had that big hit with Patsy Cline's version, and like I said, he made a decent amount of money. And the thing is, he said he spent most of the money that he got from Patsy Cline's version of Crazy. What he spent all that money on, he said, was his own career. He was investing himself in it and touring, because like the record labels and stuff, like he wasn't a big enough artist that they were investing a lot of money for him to tour around the country and stuff. He invested the money he got from that hit single, and he put it into his own music and his own career and touring and setting things up, and he did that for years and years. But unfortunately, by the time he got into like the early 70s, he was pretty much busted. You know, he had a divorce, and he had a fire in where he was living. His home burned down, and he was not making any money, really significant money, off of music anymore. And he kind of invested and spent all that money he had made initially off of the Crazy single all those years ago. So he was kind of busted out. Him and Waylon Jennings, his buddy, they were buddies, and then they even moved in and lived together, and they were both kind of busted out. But then they got this like manager, this new manager, the two of them, and they decided, you know, fuck it, let's grow beards, let's do music the way we want to, and fuck it, we got nothing to lose. And that's the thing, men that got nothing to lose, well, women that got nothing to lose, anyone, human beings, aliens, whatever, from another planet, if you got nothing to lose, hey, that's when you probably do your best work, because you're just being honest and real, because you got nothing to lose. You're like, hey, fuck it. I'm going to do things my way. Not the way I think Nashville wants me to do it, but they were embracing the Texas thing. They were like, hey, we're from Texas, and we're going to do things our way, the Texan way, and look the way we want to look, sound the way we want to sound, make the kind of music we want to make that's an authentic expression of who we are as men. Love it. Love it. I love when people do shit like that. And when they do shit like that, that's when they have their best shit. And well, you know, and this is the shock. And like I said, you hear a little bit creeping in a little bit with Yesterday's Wine, but this is where it's like full-fledged, I'm a fucking outlaw, Willie Nelson. It's amazing, right? And this is my second favorite Willie Nelson album. So there you go. Spoiler alert. You know what my very favorite Willie Nelson, very favorite country album is now. If you know your Willie Nelson. If you don't, listen to me, and I'm gonna tell you a thing or two about a thing or two. So it starts off with the title track, Shotgun Willie, but kind of funky. You know, it's a country song, but there's like horns on it, and it's got kind of a funky groove. It's almost like country R&B. You'd have to hear it. It's like it's got a funky groove, but swaggering. It sounds like a guy kind of waking up in the morning in his double-wide trailer and kind of staggering around. That's like the feeling of the groove of the song, and it's great. And then it's got one of Willie's most popular and enduring songs, a classic. You know, I'm sure Willie can never play a concert where he doesn't do this one. Whiskey River. Whoa! That's the song that really sold me on country music and outlaw country. Because, you know, I was more of a rock guy. I mean, I liked other kinds of music. I liked jazz, and I loved funk and R&B and soul. But mainly I was like a rock guy. But I tell you, I wasn't really into country when I was younger. I always I remember as a little kid hanging out in like little Florida bars with my parents, and I would hear like On the Road Again all the time. So, I mean, I had some nostalgic fond memories. I remember like in the early 80s, remember as a child hearing Willie Nelson. So I always like what I heard. I was like, whatever I heard of Willie Nelson's I liked. But to be honest, I didn't hear too much of his stuff. And it was really, it was I don't know, about maybe 15 years ago when I first heard this. And that was kind of Willie was my gateway. He was my gateway to country music. I got into Willie before Waylon Jennings. I wouldn't have gotten into Waylon if it wasn't for Willie. Willie was and all the other artists have gotten into a huge Dolly Parton fan. And I'm going to do a video about her too. I love her, and I love so many great artists, especially from the 60s and 70s in country music. And I've gotten into even some modern country. Now, I'm still not as into modern country as I am to this period, but I do like some of it. I do like some of it, especially the artists that are a little more nouveau outlaw. So yeah, and this was the album. I got into it. It was actually this box set, because what I did, I was sampling Willie I think it was on YouTube. I was just like, this was before Spotify. So when I sampled music to buy, because I do like to support artists, so I always buy albums, but I like to test shit out. You want to test shit out. So I used to do it on YouTube before Spotify. And I fell into like a Willie K-hole. And I just started listening to a lot of Willie Nelson. And it seemed like, I was like, well, it seems like it's this album and the subsequent albums, that seems to be the stuff I like most. Specifically 2 songs, Whiskey River and Bloody Mary Mornings. Those 2 songs, I was like, those are the 2 most awesome country songs I've ever heard. And then I went on Amazon, and this I don't know if it had just come out or it was out, but it wasn't like an obscene price, so it couldn't have been like too long ago. And here it was, remastered. These are all remastered. In fact, I believe this is the only way you can get these 2 albums remastered. They never sold them individually. So this was it. Like, otherwise you're just getting some old CD from maybe like the 80s or something. Because yeah, this was it. This is the only way you got them remastered. And I had disposable income, so I was like, yeah, fuck it, I'll buy it. So I bought it, and that was it. So this was my first major country purchase. So so I have sentimental value to it, and it was my gateway, and it got me started. Before you knew it, within a year I had a lot of Willie albums, and then I got into Waylon, and I started buying all Waylon stuff. So this is an important album for me. And Whiskey River, that was like the song that I heard. I was like, oh my god, this is awesome. It's awesome. It's country music, but it does have a rock and roll soul to it, because it's outlaw stuff. There's rebelling in it. You're rebelling but there's pathos, and it's all in there. I love Whiskey River. It's one of Willie's greatest songs. Great guitar playing. I love this song, and I still love it. It's a great last call song. If you're at a bar, sometimes I take over the jukebox, and this would always be like, I would kind of time it. It'd be like the last song on the list of songs I play at the bar, especially if we were getting towards closing time. But usually my selection of music was wrapping up. You always knew it was like the last song. It was always Whiskey River. That was my last song. And I love that song, always do. Sad songs and waltzes, beautiful ballad. That's the thing, he does the outlaw shit, but then, and Waylon did the same shit. Willie just sings his heart out, and beautiful ballad, beautiful voice. Willie Nelson has one of the greatest voices of the 20th century, and so unique, still to this day. And I'll say this, Waylon's my favorite singer, my favorite country singer, and my favorite country artist. But I will say Willie's voice is a little more unique than his. Because I've heard a few people sing like Waylon, but I've never heard anyone, still to this day, really sing like Willie Nelson. It is such an idiosyncratic and unique voice. And I think one thing that really separates him from other country artists is there's a jazz influence in his playing. Both his guitar playing and his songwriting, but you especially can hear this like in some of his earlier stuff, like Nightlife. There's this kind of loungy jazz influence. Like, it sounds like he likes stuff like Frank Sinatra, and it kind of comes through in his singing a little bit. He has a little bit of a jazz crooner's phrasing. His phrasing is there's a kind of a jazz quality to it. Especially comes out in the ballads. Like. When you listen to Willie sing a ballad, it feels like a country version of Frank Sinatra singing a ballad in terms of how he phrases it. It's melodic, it's filled with soul, an amazing voice, Another singer kind of similar is, I'd say Marvin Gaye. Marvin Gaye had a jazz influence too. He was a little more into jazz than a lot of R&B artists. And his phrasing when he sings a ballad, likewise, sounds like he's a guy that maybe likes some Frank Sinatra. I just hear a little of that influence. And Miles Davis as a trumpet player, likewise, and he cited Frank Sinatra as an influence. So when he played the trumpet, there's a quality that's soft, almost like muted quality. That's what I'd say, a muted quality. And, Miles Davis was famous for playing a muted trumpet. And these are not artists that everyone would compare to. Most people wouldn't think to compare to these artists. But when I hear Miles Davis, when I hear Marvin Gaye, when I hear Willie Nelson, I hear that they're all kind of taking a cue from Frank Sinatra with muted singing, which I would say is kind of restrained singing. It's reined in. It's not too showy, but there's a lot of pathos. And there's not like a lot of vibrato. It's kind of I would say like a straight line, like a straight, beautiful, soulful line. And that's the best way I could kind of describe it. And that's where I think there is a Sinatra influence, because that's how Sinatra sang, like a straight, soulful line. And I hear that influence in Willie Nelson. I never looked into it. This might be Actually, what am I talking about? He just, like a year or two ago, he did that whole album of Sinatra covers. So there you go. That proves my theory. Science. So there you go. So, and that's something that made him a little different and distinct. Local Memory, great song. Every song on this album's great. It's a perfect album. Slow Down, Old World. I love that. That's a world-weary, hangover kind of ballad. I love that song. Nice orchestration on that. Stay All Night, Stay a Little Longer. Nice kind of shuffling along country song. Love that. Devil in a Sleeping Bag. Great outlaw country song. All this whole album, Willie Nelson's great hangover music. Even though a lot of the songs are about drinking, but a lot of the songs are also about the morning after. A lot of them. It just has that vibe. It has the vibe. If you want to have really great hangover music that makes you feel better during the hangover while kind of embracing the hell-raising you did the night before, then Willie's your guy. And especially these two albums. So Devil in a Sleeping Bag, that's great. She's Not For You is great. Bubbles in My Beer, that's a great kind of whimsical, kind of funny, old school, kind of Hank Williams sounding country song with the fiddle and all. Love it. Love Bubbles in My Beer. That's great. You Look Like the Devil, great. 2 songs with devil in the title too. How metal's that? So there you go. If you're a metal fan, listen to some Willie Nelson, you'll hear some outlaw country metal. So Much to Do, and A Song for You, another great ballad. And then you get a lot of bonus tracks, a lot of variations. When I put it in my music library, I don't include I did that thing because I am OCD of music. I took all these bonus tracks because I want to hear the album the way the artist imagined it, and I like hearing it just in, like, they have a last song, especially in these 2 albums. The last song is like, it represents something, and it's like, it's designed to be the last song. So I don't like it going into a bunch of bonus tracks, especially when the bonus tracks are pretty much just alternate versions of the other songs. So I did that thing, and I've talked about this in other videos, where I take the bonus tracks and then I create, in some cases, an EP. But in this case, it was like a full, long album because there's so much. I took all the Atlantic Session bonus tracks and made this whole album out of it as a separate thing, and it is worth listening to. These alternate versions are very different, and sometimes they have totally different arrangements, and so it's definitely worth listening to. Plus, there are a few other tracks that you don't get on the album, but what this is about is those first 12 songs. My second favorite Willie Nelson album, one of my all-time favorite country albums, definitely in my top 10. Shotgun Willie, it's amazing. It's amazing, and these remasters sound amazing. A great remaster job, and they didn't overdo it. They didn't brick wall it, make it too loud. It's very clean and dynamic mastering. They did a great job. And then we get to this album. Oh man. Okay, this album. Now this, Phases and Stages. This is the album I was talking about. This is my very favorite country album of all time. And it always will be. I can't imagine, after like 15 years, it's still my favorite. And I've listened to a lot more country music since I first got into this. But it holds up. It's still my very favorite country album and one of my favorite albums of all time, period. And I got the vinyl version of it too, right here. There you go. See, much bigger. Much bigger. There you go. Phases and Stages, the old copy. I got it for how much? $7.99. Amoeba Records. Amoeba Records on Sunset. Not there anymore. Isn't that sad? End of an era. I used to love going to Amoeba on Sunset. It was a great thing to do. You hit Amoeba Records and then you go to the ArcLight Theater, and that's not there anymore either. Yeah, they shut down. No more ArcLight. Very sad, very sad. But I always have my memories. I always have my memories of going in and buying up music and movies and stuff, and then going and catching a movie at the Dome. Great memories, LA. You should hold on to that shit. You should hold on to that shit, not throw your culture in the trash. It's great culture. Anyway, so Phases and Stages. Sounds good on vinyl. Actually, not as good. This is one of the few cases where the CD sounds better. Oh, that's a little trippy. Whoa, Infinity. Because this is a nice new remastered CD, it actually sounds better than this old... It's not like scratched up. It's in good condition, but it is an old record, and it's one of the... Usually, I always prefer the sound of vinyl, but in this case, yeah, I go with the remastered CD. But I still like to put the vinyl. It's warm. It crackles a little bit. Have a whiskey with it. Phases and Stages. It's a divorce album. This is a divorce album, and it's a concept album. It's a country concept album. Something else too, which... Now that I'm thinking about the Frank Sinatra influence, because Frank Sinatra is really the father of the concept album. In the 50s, starting with the early 50s, within the wee small hours, Frank Sinatra did a certain kind of album. And I'm going to do a Sinatra episode at some point. I got it. I'm an Italian-American. I will do that at some point. He did a lot of these albums that were concept albums where it was a theme. Like some albums were like swinging and fun and they had a certain kind of theme, or like travel, like Come Fly With Me, the theme is travel. And he did a lot of these, he called them suicide albums, Frank Sinatra, because he did a lot of albums that were all filled with sad, like Crying in My Beer ballads. And they're my favorite Frank Sinatra albums. My very, very favorite one, Only the Lonely, that's to me one of the greatest albums of all time. I love that, but I also love In the Wee Small Hours too. And I love Frank's suicide albums. So it's just a collection of ballads, and they have a running theme. I feel like Willie was influenced by that. Even though the songs aren't all ballads and there are upbeat songs on this, there's definitely a theme going on. I guess another album very similar to this that I hear people talk about far more is Bob Dylan's Blood on the Tracks. Blood on the Tracks is a great album. I do love it, but that's like kind of considered like the ultimate divorce album. Like that's considered the best. And I tell you, I don't think it's Blood on the Tracks. I think it's this or Marvin Gaye's Here My Dear. Marvin Gaye's Here My Dear or this are the two best divorce albums ever. Two best divorce albums ever. And the first side is through his ex-wife's point of view. What she was thinking, after they split. And the second side is from his point of view. So it's a she said, he said thing. Only one song, which we'll talk about when we get to the second side, which was an earlier song that he dusted off and redid for this. Everything else fits into this theme. And normally I'm not a big concept album, with the exception, I love those Sinatra albums and stuff like that. I guess when the concept's more of an emotional one, when it's like an emotional concept, I kind of like it more than when it's like some more eggheady kind of academic storyline kind of concept. But I mean, it's kind of like the movies I like and the things I like. I mean, generally speaking, I like a strong emotional through line. I'm that kind of cat. I'm that kind of writer. That's the kind of guy I am. And Willie's lyrics, very underrated. I prefer Willie Nelson's lyrics to Bob Dylan. And I like Bob Dylan's lyrics, but he's a little, I wouldn't say academic, but there's a kind of a smart college guy kind of thing going on with Dylan's lyrics. He did less so in the late 60s and into the 70s. That's more in his early folk stuff. But still, he never entirely shook that off, that there's a kind of pervasive cleverness to his stuff, which at times feels a little artificial. At times. Even though I do love his music and think he's a great songwriter. Willie manages to be very clever without that academic side that Bob had, and it's just a little more straight up and it's a little less try hard. I guess that's what I'm saying. Like Dylan, there's a little hint of try hard, like a guy who's like trying to be clever with his lyrics. Whereas Willie's just a little more clever but in an off the cuff way, and so it's just a little more straight up, but still very clever and very witty and filled with a lot of different emotions. And I mean, just his lyrics alone, not let alone how he sings them. It's poetry, but without being too try hard or bringing too much attention to it. You get a full meal with Willie. It's like the singing, the performance, the music, the melodies, the song, the lyrics, and it's all kind of equal. Whereas with Dylan, even, it's like he's like kind of putting his lyrics front and center. Like, that's the thing. Whereas with Willie, it's all the thing, and this whole album, it's everything, and it's great. But so this song, side one, Phases and Stages, that's the theme. That's a motif that runs throughout this album. You hear a lot of jazz influence in it. You hear a little jazz in it. And that's that. And it goes a Phases and Stages theme / washing the dishes. And it's her talking about being frustrated with her domestic situation, his ex-wife. And then you got Phases and Stages theme, walking. And it's talking about her wanting to leave. That she's starting to think that it'd be better to walk away from this life of drudgery, that she's starting to feel this existence, because I guess she was staying at home while Willie was going out. Willie was going out on tour and romping it up and having fun and cheating on her and living this Hellraiser life, and she's back washing the dishes, and she's like, fuck that noise. She wanted to emancipate herself from Willie Nelson. And Willie, to his credit, maybe he wasn't the right kind of man and the man she needed to be at the time, but at least he respects his wife. And I said the same thing with Marvin Gaye and Here, My Dear, that there's still this respect, unfortunately probably too late, but there's this respect to looking back and showing empathy towards their ex and putting themselves in their shoes. And maybe if they did that more before, they wouldn't have been their ex. But hey, that's being a tragic artist sometimes, It's not until afterwards that you realize what you did and how you were an asshole. And that's it. This is Willie Nelson. Essentially, side one is him going into his wife's point of view. It's like, hey, I get it now. I get why I was an asshole to you. And then to string all these beautiful songs around it, it's great. That's what makes him a fucking genius. Willie Nelson's a genius, and this is his greatest album. And I think that's a scientific fact. So after that, he's got Pretend I Never Happened. Oh my God, one of my favorite songs. I always loved Pretend I Never Happened. One of my favorite Willie Nelson songs. An amazing song. Amazing lyrics, the music, guitar, everything, love it. Sisters Coming Home / Down at the Corner Beer Joint. What a great title. Sisters Coming Home / Down at the Corner Beer Joint. Essentially 2 songs kind of combined into one. She's going home to your family. That's what you do sometimes. After a breakup, you go and you're with your family, and you need that support. You need the home team support, and Sister's doing that. And I love the line about the blue jeans, feel a little tighter than they did before. And she's got to go out with her sister to a bar. And man, this is real life shit. That's the thing. Real life shit. And Willie captures it beautifully. Amazing lyricist. One of the greatest lyricists of the 20th century, let alone the music. Like this is amazing. Amazing stuff. How Will I Know I'm Falling in Love Again? So it's essentially, this is about her. And there's a chronology here. His ex-wife is moving on, finding another fella, and moving on with her life. And Willie takes us there all the way. And that's only just side one. And we follow. But then side two is Willie's side. All right? That vagabond, that ne'er-do-well that chased his wife away. Now it's his turn. Now it's his side. And he starts with actually a song he wrote a couple years prior that was an earlier version, appears on an album a few years prior, which is Bloody Mary Morning. Now, this is the other song, along with Whiskey River, that really got me into Willie Nelson. I was like, oh shit, this is one of the greatest country songs I've ever heard. It's amazing. It's a classic. It's another song like Whiskey River that became a live staple. They would always play live, and it's amazing. And it's usually this version. The earlier version was a little folkier and more stripped down. This version's big and more. It has got the banjos going. It's a bigger production. It's a little more rocking. You could tell why, this had to be a song that he would play a lot live. And this just gets the party going. And I tell you, why it works with the theme. Even though it was a song he wrote earlier, the lyrics are all about him going around and hopping on planes and flying to L.A. And this is about him going out and touring and living that wild life, where you need a Bloody Mary in the morning. And I've lived a little bit of that life myself. Maybe not as much as Willie has, but I could relate. And that's the thing. I was flying back a lot from the East Coast to LA, so I could really relate to this song. And let's just say I had a lot of Bloody Mary mornings myself. And I still do from time to time, but not quite as much as I did during this time period. And I was listening to this, and Man, let's just say I was relating. I was relating to Willie. This song's amazing. Love the lyrics. This is a superior version to the earlier version. This is the definitive version. One of the greatest country songs ever. One of my top 5 favorite country songs. My favorite Willie song. This is my favorite Willie song from my favorite album. And I know it's a song a lot of people love, but fuck it, they're right. A lot of people are right sometimes. This is amazing. This should have sold as much as On the Road Again. But I guess it's a little boozier and a little bit more specific. But that's why I love it even more. Because I like when things are boozy and specific. Boozy and specific, that's my jam. Then we got, the Phases and Stages theme comes back. No Love Around. He comes back. He's back from the tour, back from doing his Bloody Mary mornings, but he's looking around. Whoa. There's no love around here anymore. That's right. His wife got fed up with his fucking outlaw shit and left. And now he's alone. Now he's looking around. And there's no one there. He took her for granted that she would always be there. But she's not there, Willie. Sorry. And that's what that song's about. And then I Still Can't Believe You're Gone. Well, that's obvious what that song's about. He's wrestling with this. He's struggling it. It's like that you don't know what you got until it's gone thing, and I can relate. A lot of people can relate. You took this woman for granted, this woman that built a life with you, and you thought she would always be there. You thought you'd get to run off and be this ne'er-do-well outlaw country guy and play your honky-tonks and have your fun. And then you thought you'd go back and she'd always be there for you, making a meal for you and rubbing your back and making love to you and just being that home base for you. But what was she doing when you were gone? She was unhappy, lonely, and miserable. And so you get there and that's it. But now he's alone and he's wrestling with this because, he misses her. He loved her and he missed her and he realizes what he did wrong, but it's too late now. But you can make a great album out of it, at very least. It's not supposed to be that way. That's one of the greatest songs Willie ever wrote. One of the greatest songs on this album. I love it. This is probably my third favorite. No, maybe fourth favorite. Yeah, I'd say fourth favorite song on the album. It's not supposed to be that way. It's an amazing song. Amazing lyrics. So true. The emotions are raw in it. And it's just like what we were supposed to love each other. Like, this is the thing. We're supposed to love each other forever. And and you're supposed to understand me, and you're supposed to not mind having this ne'er-do-well outlaw country guy, but it's not happening. Like, something changed. Like, you changed, and you don't love me anymore, and that's what this song's about. And it's an amazing song, one of the great divorce songs, breakup songs ever. I love this song. Then you got Heaven and Hell. Now, that's my third favorite song on the album. Another Willie classic. Very short. That's the only, if I have one criticism, I said the same thing about Waylon Jennings this time. If I have one criticism, and that's the studio version of Waylon Jennings this time, is that they're too short. Heaven and Hell is just a 1 minute and 53 second song, but it's so catchy. It's so memorable. The lyrics are great. And before you know it, it's gone. So just like, hey, Willie, that's a great song. Maybe just 2 minutes and 53 seconds. That's all. That's all I'm saying. Maybe make it a little bit longer. Although one of the things that makes it so great might be that it leaves you wanting more. I'll say that. So, love Heaven and Hell. An amazing Willie Nelson song. And this is where you kind of hear him picking it up a little bit. And he was like thinking back that living with her, sometimes it was heaven, sometimes it was hell. And that's something else I can relate to, and a lot of people can relate to. That's the thing you think when you love someone, but they drive you crazy. And, he was driving her crazy, but it sounds like this from Heaven and Hell that she was driving him crazy sometimes too. I'm guessing when he came back from tours before she left, she was probably there, but they probably fought a lot. That would be my guess from Heaven and Hell. And that's the thing. You love someone, but you fight with them, and it's Heaven and Hell. One of the greatest songs ever about the dynamic between a couple, between two people living together, and they love each other, but they fucking hate each other too. And there you go. Number 6, Phases and Stages theme comes back again. And then we go to the final track, what would become another Willie live staple for many years. Pick Up the Tempo. Pick Up the Tempo. Great song. One of Willie's best songs. In the same way his wife was hitting the beer joint with her sister and moving on and finding a new love. Well, Willie's just like, all right, I'll hit the honky tonk. give me some beers. I'm moving on, I guess. That's it. So pick up the tempo. Let's have fun. That's all you can do. What can you do when the woman you love leaves you? All you can do is just pick up the tempo and move on. He wrestled with it. So on the side, we start off Bloody Mary Morning with explaining what his lifestyle was like. And then it's all him coming back and finding out his wife is gone. And then him wrestling with it and feeling that he lost her. But then kind of coming to the conclusion that they kind of were driving each other crazy and maybe this is for the best. And then going out to the honky tonk and moving on with life. Because what else can you do? You can't cry in your beer forever. At some point, you got to hit the honky tonk, have fun, dance, get laid. That's all you can do. And this really, and I love Here My Dear, Marvin Gaye's Here My Dear, but that's the second best divorce album. This is the greatest divorce album of all time. Science. Take that, baby. And it's a masterpiece. And this remastered, like the other one, sounds amazing. But this is not all you get in the Atlantic Sessions box set. No, check this out. Now, what this is a live album. Willie Nelson live at the Texas Opry House. And this was a live album that he recorded shortly after Phases and Stages, and it was going to be his next Atlantic album, was going to be this live album, but it was shelved. I wouldn't say it's my favorite live Willie album. My favorite live Willie album is actually the Honeysuckle Rose soundtrack. Of course, the album that has On the Road Again, and for the most part, the majority of that is actually a live performance from Willie Nelson, and that's my favorite live versions of a lot of these songs. And some of these songs are actually on that because they became staples, like Whiskey River and Bloody Mary Mornings. And overall, that's my favorite live Willie Nelson album. But this is easily my second favorite Willie Nelson live album, one of my favorite live country albums. And it's great. It's got Whiskey River, Me and Paul, a couple medleys of his older stuff, Crazy, Nightlife, Stay All Night, Walking, Bloody Mary Mornings, Does It, Party's Over, Truck Driving Man. That's great. She Thinks I Still Came, Good Hearted Woman. A couple of these songs, the Waylon Jennings covered and his studio versions became the definitive versions. But, Willie does these great live versions of these songs. Sister's Coming Home. And it also has a bunch of bonus tracks, which are from a lot of songs from these albums. Shotgun Willie, Look Like the Devil, another version of Bloody Mary Morning, and another medley of the older stuff, Funny How Time Slips Away, Crazy, Nightlife. And then you get this really cool bonus track, again, supporting my Willie's a jazz guy theory. It's this long, I think it's like 15 minutes long, Willie's After Hours. And essentially what Willie's After Hours is this really long instrumental that kind of bridges country and jazz. I'd say it's a countrypolitan. It's and it's country and jazz, and Willie does a lot of his guitar soloing on it, a lot of his acoustic guitar soloing. It's essentially like loungy after hours jazz music, but done in a country way. And it just shows you that's one of the things that distinguishes Willie Nelson is that he's combining the country and the jazz. In Willie's After Hours, it's a great song. I love it. I mean, it's an instrumental. It's essentially a long jazz piece done in a country style. It's a great addition to this box set. And it has a booklet, of course, and all that stuff. So there you go. This is one of the greatest box sets of all time, remastered. This is like the definitive way to have these albums. And they're the two greatest Willie Nelson albums, in my opinion. And a live album that's great, that scorches during this great period of his. And like I said, has a great box. And I love it. I love these two albums. Get this box set if you can. It's worth it. Willie Nelson, he's a genius, and this is his peak. And I love a lot of the stuff he did afterwards, and he got only more successful afterwards. But to me, creatively speaking, this is his peak. And Phases and Stages is his peak. One of the greatest albums of all time. And that's pretty much all I gotta say. So there you go. Check it out, and it's great crossover stuff. If you're into other kind of music, hey, this is the album that got me into country music. So Shotgun Willie and Phases and Stages might get you into country music too. It's great stuff, and if you do love country music, well, what are you doing if you haven't heard these albums yet? Go ahead, you gotta listen to these albums. God damn it, two of the greatest country albums of all time. I love it. I love whiskey. I love Willie Nelson, and I love life. And I'm saying cheers.